Sox on 35th is next. Doors open on the left.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Coughlin, and welcome to the Sox on 35th podcast. We are back with another exciting episode covering your Chicago White Sox. As always, I'm joined by our panelists, Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
I mean, we're not doing great, honestly, based on how the team is doing. I think that when I first found out from my work that I was going to be going on 2 trips, like the middle and last weeks of April back to back, I was thinking like, damn, I'm going to miss on all the early White Sox games. Those are going to be some great games. I wish I could watch them live. And now I'm thinking this was actually great timing because I did watch some of them, but obviously, I mean, who would want to watch every inning of whatever that was this past week? So yeah, not doing great, but it is what it is.
So last year when Engel dropped that pop-up and foul play and then the Orioles walked it off right after that, I was on a baseball trip. And I was in South Carolina, so I wasn't supposed to be watching baseball. And they were on ESPN or whatever. I found it, turned it on, watched that. I'm like, I just got to get away from this team for a little bit. But I'm doing fine. I do want to start by asking if Duke is, or Mr. Eyeroll, Duke is willing to apologize for or for a few weeks ago when I merely suggested Luis Robert shouldn't hit 2. If you're willing to apologize for that eye roll yet, I at least want to start there.
There is a 0% shot I'm going to apologize for that, mainly because you can't hold me accountable for random people on Twitter. Like that's just not fair. I was not the one throwing digs and asking who the guy with the long hair was on the, who is this guy? I muted him a long time ago. I wasn't saying that stuff. I was being nice. I gave a subtle eye roll, and maybe I was agreeing with you with that eye roll. I don't know.
Subtle eye roll. Really? Is that what you call that?
Yeah, well, our editing team really didn't help us on that one, but no, I'm not apologizing for anything. I'm still very comfortable with Luis Robert, and I still feel like his speed was shown on display once he gets on the base pass in the game today or yesterday, whenever you were potentially listening to this, the last game against the Rays. Yeah, I don't know. That's neither here nor there. Anyway, I'm doing great. Not really, because, I convinced myself before we jumped into the Philly series that it's like, you know what, this is a great test. We've choked away these series. We haven't won one yet, but, we've looked good in a lot of these games. I keep going back to the freaking Astro series because I'm an idiot. And I'm like, you know what? The Phillies have played a lot of playoff baseball. The Rays have played a lot of playoff baseball. They're the hottest team in baseball right now. Like, man, if we can just knock out a couple wins against these guys, like, we are all the way back. And I should have known better. I should have known better. I let my fan get in the way of me, and that's my fault. But anyway, we have quite a bit to cover in this episode, so let's just keep it rolling. We have Senior Contributor Tim Moran joining us later on, but before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you might get your podcast. Also, be sure to check out the website at Sox on 35th, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Sox on 35th. So, just jumping right in, I mean, I kind of kicked it off a little bit with my thoughts on the Phillies and the Rays. Nick, I'll let you go ahead and jump right into this. What are your thoughts on the past week of White Sox baseball?
I mean, they're pretty bad, the thoughts, and the team, frankly. I mean, here, when you're 7-15, it's hard to be optimistic about anything. I do think even the least optimistic person should be able to admit that this White Sox team, while maybe not the playoff team that we hoped, although it's too early to say that for sure, they're definitely not a Washington Nationals, Oakland A's level worst team in baseball either. Like, I don't think they're going to finish the season with 100 losses or whatever they're on pace for now. Frankly, I think it's a lot more. So it is just kind of the annoying thing where you just have to wait a little bit. Things will even out. There's positive regression coming for a lot of guys. The schedule gets easier, etc. But at the same time, you can't just ignore what's happening before our eyes. And these games are very frustrating because to me, it's not one constant problem. Like, yes, there are recurring themes that I'm sure we'll talk about, but it's not like, oh, every single game the starting pitching can't make it out of the third inning, or every single game they score 1 or 2 runs. Like, yeah, those problems happen from time to time, but it's always a mix of different things. Like, for example, earlier in the season, it was that the bullpen was always just absolute garbage. And lately the bullpen, I don't know if I'd say it's been great, but it's definitely been a lot better, and it's no longer the primary reason that these games are being lost. So it's just the kind of thing where nothing can ever be clicking at the same time, which is very frustrating, of course, and it's not the way that we wanted the Pedro Grifol era to start. Although, honestly, if they're going to be a bad team, I'd rather they let us know sooner than later, because last year was quite annoying just waiting for that run to come, which never came.
I think along the fact that they really haven't lost any game the same way. It's the bullpen this way, the rotation that way. Kind of what you said, Nick. It's that this entire week felt like winnable games for the most part. They got one against Philly. They felt like winnable games. And you know, when you get to the Rays series and you lose the last game 4-1, and the Rays just carved you up top to bottom, is what it is. You're gonna have one of those games in a series. Like the least surprising to me is that the Rays came out one day, hit a bunch of bombs, and carved our dudes up. Like, that is the least surprising thing to me. The problem is that they lost the 2 games that were winnable before that. You can't drop those 2 games when you're given the chance, because inevitably the Rays are going to do what the Rays do. They're an 18, 19-3 team for a reason. Like, this happens because they play consistently good baseball. So when you have that chance, you need to capitalize. They did not do that in this series. And that's the most frustrating part, is that they're in the games, they're in these series, and they're just not winning them. It's like you still have that false optimism maybe because of it. It's like it keeps you tuning in, it keeps you interested, but it's like now all the small decisions that Pedro Grifol has to make, from the lineup to the bullpen decisions, all of that gets put under a microscope now, because you're in these games, you're in these series, you're just not pulling them out. Why? What's going wrong? What do you have to fix? There's a lot of questions, and asking those questions opens the door to hours and hours of discussion that there's really no good answer for just yet. It's frustrating that, for me, there's no pinpoint answer to any of this right now.
Yeah, and I think that's what really has a lot of us as frustrated as we are. I guess just speaking on behalf of the entire fan base, because like we know what bad baseball looks like. We know what like an untalented baseball team looks like. Like we all watched White Sox like in the mid 2010s. Like we know what that looks like, you know, and that's not what this team is. And that's not what this team has been, even when Tony La Russa was the manager. Like, this is a team that has the talent and they hang around in games. And, you know, to a point, they play down to their competition, because you'll see them lose to really bad teams that you know that we are more talented than. And then you'll see us just battle teams that are going to be playing in the postseason. You know what I mean? Like, it's just wild to me. You know, I think you kind of nailed it on the head, Jordan, where Grifol's decisions are going to be under a little bit more of a microscope. You know, I think that's a little warranted. You know, I think any manager we have at this point, when we're not winning baseball games, deserves to be under that microscope. You know, even if it is a first-year manager. We were told that this guy was brought in to be, you know, have an analytical mindset, somebody that was going to get the most out of these players, was a player's guy. You know, he's a former player. I mean, that's most managers, but still. We were kind of sold the moon with this guy, and I still do like Pedro Grifol. I think he has a lot of positives that he adds to the team that we didn't see in the Tony La Russa era. But at the same time, like when we're sitting where we're at right now, what 7-15, I think you said, Nick. Like it's tough go. It's a tough go right now, you know. And does one month define the entire season? No. But I think all of us have a little bit of fatigue of last year when Steve Stone was telling us every single week to enjoy the ride. You know what I mean? And I don't know if any of us want to just try to sit and wait, because we saw how that played out last year. We need to be able to kind of take advantage of the division we have in front of us, and being able to play it tough against teams that are playing a lot of postseason baseball, like the Philadelphia Phillies and the Tampa Bay Rays, will help us down the stretch when we play, you know, division rivals, you know, like Cleveland and the Twins. You know, the Twins don't win playoff games, but still, you know, they're tough out in the regular season. So this is something where we need to start turning these tight games into wins, and we need to handle business against like teams like Pittsburgh. You know, like that series I think bugs me more than any of the rest of them, because that was a series we should have either swept or won easily, and we just let get out of our hands because either we wanted to get too cute with the bullpen, use too many arms during a blowout win, or just flat out offense goes flat at the worst possible times. But it's never just one issue with this team. It's accumulation on any given day, and it's really frustrating.
And it's about trends too, right? Like the starting rotation is looking better. They turned in a bunch of mid performances this week, but it's an improvement. The bullpen has turned in a bunch of better performances recently. I think the big one that stands out is the Lopez blown save. I know fans were up in arms over what Grifol said and the fact that Lopez blew it. The fact of the matter is, we can have the debate. There's not really a better option right now. Kendall Graveman maybe. Other than that, there's not really a better option. I don't think that's a worthy debate that Sox fans seem to want to have. Then it comes to the offensive side of things. And the trends, it still feels like they're trying to break old habits, and they just can't do it. I focus on Luis Robert a lot because he's a very good example of what the problem is. You put him in the 2 spot, and you continue to put him there. And I think this is a Pedro Grifol decision you have to break down. You continue to put him at the top of the lineup. When if you look at teams across baseball, the on-base percentage, the walk rates of their 2 hitters, he ranks either 29th or 30th compared to most of those guys. The Sox haven't had a 2-hitter walk this year. Robert's 2 walks have come as the leadoff hitter. Like, you can't have that at the top of the lineup, but you continue to put him there. And you say the 30 at-bats don't define him. I agree. 30 at-bats don't define him, but you can't continue to waste those at-bats at the top of the lineup. You can't continue to let this ship sink at 7-15 and keep sinking and sinking until Robert finally gets back into it. You need to give guys who are having better at-bats those at-bats. You can look up and down this lineup. We have multiple times. You're seeing the same problems continue over and over and over again. I think the frustrating part then becomes, when do you see those trends turn? Is it later this year? Is it into next year with this coaching staff? It's like, you have to ask the question now, do you have to give the coaching staff the runway to break all of these bad habits? The trends aren't going positive for the offense. I think that's the most frustrating part of this now, is that ground ball rate, still an issue. Walk rate, anemic, brutal, terrible. There's no give or take here. And I think someone like Gavin Sheets, who homered yesterday on a ball over his head, like, yeah, great, he hit a homer. Why are you swinging at that pitch? Like, it's just the entire it's a microcosm of the offense as a whole. Why are you swinging at a pitch like that? I don't care about the result. Why? What registered to you like this is a good pitch to hit? And as this season continues to go on, I'm going to be looking at this coaching staff and seeing, can you find changes? Can you break habits? It's not something I'm expecting them to do in 3 weeks, but there needs to be some progress there because the trends are what's concerning me.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's one thing that's so interesting about watching a team like the Rays or even the Dodgers is their hitters up and down the lineup seem to be so good at just completely spitting on pitches that are even, traveling an inch out of the zone. Not every time, of course. Sometimes you make a nasty pitch, but they're just so good at identifying early. It's something that the White Sox don't seem to be as good at. And what's frustrating for me is I want to focus on more, micro issues. But like, for example, last week I talked about bunting and how that was bothering me. They didn't, as far as I'm aware, didn't do much of that last week. But even then, it's like another example. You guys know I'm not a huge Benintendi fan. And he's kind of having the season I thought he'd have so far, but the batting average is good. Everything else is not that good. But first of all, I want him to do well, so I'm not going to take a victory lap on that. It's also too early. But second of all, you look at up and down the whole lineup, and pretty much everyone is, having similar stories for the most part. It's just really frustrating that I can't pinpoint, an individual problem and say, oh, this player needs to be better or that player needs to be better, because it's pretty much everyone. And when you talk about the trends, Jordan, I think that's a great lead into some numbers that I pulled, which are entering Sunday. The White Sox are bottom 5 in exit velocity, 29th in launch angle, bottom 5 in line drive rate, bottom 6 in fly ball rate, which of course those imply that they are indeed number 1 in ground ball rate, highest chase rate, bottom 3 walk rate, and strike out to the middle of the pack, that's the annoying thing. Last year, they were pretty much the same thing, but they didn't strike out that much. This year, they're doing all the same trends, but they're also striking out more. And it's not like they're gaining that much more power as a result. So everything about the offense as a whole is trending the wrong way, as Jordan was saying. And it's frustrating because the coaching staff, at least in this case, from what I understand, seems to be saying the right things. They understand the importance of hitting the ball in the air, pulling the ball, etc. But we're just not seeing it happen with these hitters. And these messages take time to resonate, but I'm getting really tired of watching them just beat the ball into the ground over and over.
And again, I completely agree. It's not. I don't think it's going to be something. They're saying the right things. I don't think it's going to be something that happens as a fix in the first 3 weeks of the season. Like these are season-long, career-long habits that need to be broken right now for a lot of these hitters. Well, only other thing I'll add before someone calls me out on it or something, I'm not taking a victory lap on Luis Robert either. I'm just giving Duke crap, and I'm saying we need more out of someone who I know can be a lot better.
Well, I mean, even to jump on that point, Jordan, I think we're almost doing it by necessity right now because we really don't have a great guy to put into the 2-hole as it currently stands. Unfortunately, the best guy to put into the 2-hole that we would have been able to put in the 2-hole that started the season red hot is injured currently, and that'd be Yohan Moncada. That's a guy who I would be very much in favor of. I think he's played some of his best baseball batting from the 2-hole. He's a guy who's very patient in the box as far as taking walks, and he's somebody who has enough pop to be able to justify being that spot in the order. And he's a guy that could potentially move Tim Anderson over as well. And he's not somebody who's necessarily a slouch on the base path, I guess, depending on his mood on the day, But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of things that we're gonna have to see moving forward that's really starts trending us in the right direction, because currently the way we're doing things with the lineup construction, with how guys are performing, with Luis Robert continuing to chase sliders and trying to make things happen out of the box, with guys like Gavin Sheets swinging at baseballs that are just, at helmet level. I mean, I know that home run reminded me of like a vintage Prince Fielder home run, but Gavin Sheets is not Prince Fielder. So I think somebody might need to sit him down and tell him that. Maybe not on his birthday, but it's just it's things we're going to need to see play out. It is still, like, I will be the guy to say that it is still a little early in the season.
Right.
It is brutal because it has been a pretty tough start to the season, especially with how the opening series went and how high we were all kind of feeling after it, because we competed with the defending World Series champion that happened to have our first baseman on it. So it's definitely been a bit of a fall from grace, but if I can just kind of preach anything, there's a lot of peaks and valleys in a baseball season. It's a long season. We still got a long way to go, and I don't want to try to be some Steve Stone, enjoy the ride or anything like that. But if this team can get healthy and this rotation can start to lock it down, and we can get this guy back to potentially kind of help out our entire bullpen, and get guys in roles where we need to be, and not have Reynaldo Lopez be forced in the 9th inning because he pitched a great 8th inning to set up our guy Liam Hendricks. Potentially we could get some momentum moving forward, but don't hold your breath on that. But there's a lot of ways we can go about that. But health is the key, and our guy Tim Moran, who's about to join the podcast, actually made a really good article about the health issues with the Chicago White Sox, and he actually tried to answer the question on everybody's mind: are the White Sox soft? So, without further ado, I mean, I know we were having a great conversation. I know Jordan was dancing on everybody's graves there for a second. We're just we're gonna stop that, and we're gonna get to the interesting part of this episode,
Brutal.
and that is our conversation with Sox on 35th senior contributor Tim Moran. We are now excited to be joined by Sox on 35th senior contributor Tim Moran. Tim, you just wrote this awesome article regarding really kind of the big question when it comes to the Chicago White Sox with injuries. Are the White Sox soft? I know I saw the headline of this article when I saw it kind of go through the chat, and it's like, wow, somebody really went for it. And I gave it a read, and there's a lot of good information on there. But before we jump too far into that, Tim, how are you doing? Give us a little bit of info about your history with Sox on 35th, maybe history being a White Sox fan, and
sure.
Just let us know who you are. What's going on, buddy?
Sounds good. Yeah, great to be on. Excited to be able to talk about that article. Really just anything to distract from the current form of the team. But yeah, I'm Tim Moran. I've been with Sox on 35th for, I think, 5 or 6 years now. And I grew up Northwest side, but my mom was raised a Sox fan. Even though my dad's a Cubs fan, I was raised a Sox fan, thankfully. And so, yeah, here we are today. I actually live near the city now. So I'm going to hopefully get to more games this summer, although I don't know how much I want to support the team. But, yeah, I've been with Sox on 35th. It's been a real good 5 years, some ups and downs with the team, but it's always been great working for this website and this blog. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just sitting here in my first year with the website, like I just love the vibe around here, and I think it's longer tenured members that really help bring everything together. And really appreciate the work you do on everything. Like usually, whenever I see you put an article through, it's something that I either put on the back burner that I'm going to eventually read, or I just jump right into it. And really, no different with this one. I'll kind of let you take the charge here. So, how did you find your ways to answer this question of are the White Sox soft?
Yeah, so I didn't come into it with any sort of preconceived bias or notion. Obviously, as fans, the injuries to start the season were frustrating. The injuries last year were frustrating. And it certainly felt like the White Sox get injured a lot. But I knew, I was thinking about it. I was like, you know what? In the grand scheme of things, I don't know how true that is. And I want to figure this out. And so it's not super easy to find injury statistics. There's really only one site for it that I saw that had a lot of features, and that was Spot Track. And they have a ton of features on like contract details is the other big thing they do. And so they keep track of contracts and injuries really well. And I was able to mostly get everything I wanted from there. They have a really good big picture injury statistics. And then it's just you have to do some manual work to sort of look at the individual players and do that math. But I came into it and I was like, all right, let's just see past couple seasons, how many games missed do the White Sox have from players on their 40-man roster as compared to all the rest of the teams in the MLB. And so it came out that in 2021, the White Sox really weren't that injured. They were like 8th or 9th least injured teams in terms of games, and I think like 6th or 7th in terms of money. And so money spent on players while they were injured during those periods. And so that was the year where Grandal was injured for a bit, Luis Robert was injured for a bit, and then, in 2021, Eloy started the year injured. But outside of those 3 stints, there really wasn't too much that was hampering the team. And then on top of that, by the time the season was over, going into that playoff series with the Astros, they had everyone back. They had all those guys. They had their starting lineup. They had their starting rotation. So I really didn't feel that, after looking at that, this has been years and years of the White Sox being soft and getting injured all the time. It became, kind of obvious that that wasn't really the case. And then 2022, though, was a bit of a different story. I have the number in front of me right here for 2022. So the Sox spent 1,400 cumulative days on the injured list, which is a lot. That's also a 40-man roster, and then $33 million on injured players. And so that was 10th most in the majors in terms of the financial number right there. The actual days missed was 15th. So definitely a little bit more on the injured side, but still nothing crazy. You look at that and you say, okay, well, the White Sox just kind of get injured about as much as their average team. It happened to be more of their key players. They spent a little bit more money, but still only 10th most in the majors. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, you know what? This doesn't feel like the right place for the article to end. I was like, there's some element to this that is missing here, and that's we need to go a little bit deeper, and let's look at the actual amount of stints on the injured list, because I feel that having like one injury over 50 days versus 3 15 to 20 day injuries for the same player, the latter there is a lot worse because you have guys bouncing back and forth between the minors and the majors. That player themselves can't come back and establish a groove. It kind of almost feels like you're ruining the entire season at that point because you can't trust them to stay healthy. They don't trust themselves to stay healthy. And, it just ruins, any sort of flow. Whereas you come back from one 40-game injury, you're healthy the rest of the season, you got a whole, time there to really get going into things. And I was like, I think that's probably maybe where this element of softness comes in. Guys just keep getting injured for a few weeks at a time, a month at a time, and that's actually really a big detriment to the team. And it turns out if you look at it from that perspective, then it kind of seems like the White Sox are soft, or at least injured a lot. And so with that part of it, I did some digging. So compared to the rest of the AL, this is where the sort of manual work takes a while. You can't pull out these magic numbers right away, but I use Spot Track. And so just in terms of total injuries to starting lineup and starting rotation, the White Sox were third in the American League in 2022. And then I kind of just did my own estimation of how many were to key players, and we were second behind Minnesota. And so really just in terms of total injury stints, total periods spent on the injured list, whether it's 10-day or 60-day or whatever, that's more where you get that the feeling that the fans are feeling. And, it just feels like guys are getting injured all the time. And even though maybe the total days, total money spent isn't there, it certainly was the case in 2022 that the White Sox had a good amount of injuries, and they happened a lot to be to key players. So it was interesting. You can look at it from a few different angles.
And I think the point you bring up there at the end, Tim, it's a good way to... I think the most impressive part of the article was you went, hey, there's 3 different ways that I'm going to go about this. I think that was incredibly important. And I think when you peel it all back, it's like, yeah, the first one everyone thinks of is how many times do I keep having to see you go, oh, 10-day IL here, 10-day IL there, 10-day IL there. Like, that's, I think, the issue for a lot of fans is, man, these guys just can't stay on the field. And I think that's the difference between, there's one huge freak injury versus there's a bunch of small nagging ones. I think those small nagging ones are the ones that are bugging people the most because it's like no one gets into a rhythm. You don't have that consistent lineup out there for large periods of the season. I think that's where, to your point, the frustration really sets in for fans.
Yeah. And also, that doesn't include the sort of day-to-day, right? Because that's not tracked. That's not an injured list stint. If your list is day-to-day, you're sore and you miss a few days. And, from last year, that happened a few times where, Moncada or Robert, right? Robert came back from these couple of these injury stints, and then he wasn't on the IL, but he was missing like 4 games at a time with that wrist. And then they'd throw him in for a game, and then he'd swing, and he'd look terrible swinging because his wrist was clearly still hurt. And so I think even if you add in, day-to-day stuff, there's also that element, too, that you can't quantify because you can't track that on any sort of site. But, the question of whether they're soft, maybe we can talk about more, or if it's just unlucky, that's a bit more of a debate. But at least in terms of the numbers there, I thought it was interesting how it broke down.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I do appreciate that you're taking a more data-based approach to this, because I feel like if you asked the common White Sox fan to rank the team's injuries over the last couple of years compared to the rest of the league, they would probably say, oh, definitely in the top 5, And part of that is not really the fans' fault in the sense that we're White Sox fans, we care about the White Sox most. We're not necessarily looking at every other roster. But it is telling that the thing you said last year about how you said that the Twins were the one team that had more key players injured, if I remember correctly. That's interesting because that's a team in our own division that, in theory, the White Sox fans should know more about compared to other teams. So that's one thing I just want to say. It's great to get the data and go from there. But going forward, I'm just curious if there was anything you found when you were researching this, or just in general, even if it's not based on research. I'm just curious about your opinion. Like you said in your article and just now, it's not necessarily, you can't say conclusively whether it's bad luck or if the team is soft, etc. But going forward, because that's obviously what's most important, do you think that this core group of players, do you think that they're just destined to be on the injured list more often than others? And I know this is kind of an impossible question, but I'm more so just trying to hear the way you arrive at the answer and why you feel that way, whether it's something that is correctable, something that will get better over time, or if it's just as simple as maybe it's not, that the core is injury prone, but that it's just a few players happen to have these nagging things, and over a long period of time, maybe a couple of them get traded away, and
Right.
the ones who are still here, aren't injured as much.
Yeah, it is a tough question. You look back at 2021 and then 2020, right? There were a couple injuries, but that was a pretty healthy year for the Sox as well. And, 2019, you didn't have 5 of the 6, 6 of the starters that are on the team right now. So it wasn't even worth it to look back that far. And so simply because of the fact that 2020 and 2021 were relatively healthy years, I can't say conclusively the White Sox are soft or the White Sox are injured and they're always going to be injured. But what I can say is the trend is concerning. The fact that last year wasn't so great, and then this year it's 2 of the players who were injured a lot last year, Moncada and Anderson right away, and then also Eloy missed 10 days. I would say the current trend is concerning, and it's hard with this stuff because it's not like performance. there's no one clear sample size you need to say whether a team or a player is going to get injured a lot. But my hunch is that they're just with the current trend. I think it's probably going to. It looks like it might be an issue again this season, at least enough to where it's going to be hard to turn around the start to the season. I mean, I'd love to see how the team plays when you have Hendricks and Crochet and Moncada and Anderson back, but then who might get injured in the time then too. So I'm not sure whether they're soft or whether they're unlucky, but I will say that the fact that it's starting this early into the season and that last year was pretty bad in terms of this number of just total injury stints, I am concerned. But there, you can't say for sure. Injuries are weird things, and so I would be concerned as Sox fans, but I don't think anyone should resign themselves, and say, "Oh, Eloy's going to go on the IL 2 more times this year, guaranteed," because people will say stuff like that, and it's just not true. So yeah, concerned, but not definitive, I guess, in either way, because it's hard.
Yeah, no doubt. And I really like the way that you finished this article by saying that the true answer probably lies somewhere in the middle, where, there is probably a discussion to be made about these guys being a little soft, and there's a discussion to be made about where we rank up with other teams as far as players getting injured. And I think White Sox fans might get, and I get the same way. I feel like we all do at some point or another. We get a little too caught up in the day-to-day with this team, and we don't kind of focus on what's happening with other teams around the league and how much they're being snake bitten by injuries as well. It's just kind of the nature of the business, I mean, if you haven't been watching baseball or following baseball probably as much as, the four of us in here have over the years, you probably wouldn't realize that injuries are very common. IL stints are very common. Even the best players in baseball, you see it all the time, whether it's a 10-day or a 15-day, or I remember it was like the 15, 30, 60, and 90 system that they had for years.
Yeah.
It's just something that kind of happens. I do think there might be something to be said about our training program of the team. I think that's something that is not talked about enough personally, because I feel like you could see a direct correlation to when we started becoming a little bit more injury prone, and I think it has a bit to do with the new training staff that we brought in. But I mean, that's an entirely different conversation altogether. But I do like that you brought up Eloy, because he is one that really gets beat over the head anytime he gets even somewhat injured. And,
Yeah.
And I'll let you kind of take the run on this, but I especially with how Eloy has played this past weekend, it's no doubt how valuable he is when he's on the field. But I don't know if I have a really hard time putting him necessarily in that soft category, because anytime I see him get injured, it looks like something that really any player could legitimately get injured on, Even running down to first base last year, he was not the only Chicago White Sox to get injured running down first base last year. You know what I mean? It was actually starting to become kind of absurd how many guys were getting injured running down first base. So I think he gets a really bad rap. I'm not sure how you feel about that necessarily as far as Eloy, because I think you look at a guy like Luis Robert, he gets injured almost nearly just as much. I feel like if you look at the percentage of games they've played compared to how many they could have potentially played throughout their career, I feel like they're closer than a lot of people give credit for. But anyway, I mean, just kind of moving out of that, though, just to be able to kind of talk to more of a positive side of things. Great article, by the way. How are you feeling about Eloy Jimenez? I know you're a big Eloy guy. He's obviously had a slower start to the year, but this past weekend against the Rays, I think, has everybody a little bit more hyped up on the Eloy Jimenez train.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big Eloy believer, especially with this move where at the least he's barely going to be in the outfield this season instead of mostly in the outfield or half in the outfield like last season and prior seasons. And so I think with him, yes, the concerns over his health are warranted because of all those players we talked about. He has been on the injured list a few times. He's missed, a bunch of games. However, my angle is that I think people were really starting to doubt Eloy's presence as a hitter because he had a slow start, and that I just can't get behind. So I'm an Eloy believer, and I'm really, hopeful to see him be healthy this year. He had the one injury to start the season, fine. But in terms of Eloy as a DH, this is a really small sample size. Eloy is an outfielder we know can get injured a lot. But Eloy as a DH, I think the jury should be out on whether he can stay healthy, and I think he maybe can. And so, assuming he stays healthy, that's where I love and believe in Eloy. Last year, he was the 7th best hitter in the major leagues in the second half by weighted runs created plus, which is just sort of total offensive value added. 7th in the major leagues over an entire second half. And so I think people need to be patient with him. These home runs, we've seen this happen. Usually when he hits one, he'll hit another the next day. And that's exactly what happened. And he almost hit another today. So almost three home runs in a row. So I think people need to be patient with him. They need to look at his overall offensive numbers and realize that this guy's a very good offensive player. And that last year especially, he really took a step forward. And so, be patient with Eloy. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's going to have a really good couple weeks here now that we see his bat heating up. So yeah, look out for that.
And I mean, I'm fine being patient. I've always been probably more patient than necessary. I think the biggest things for me that I'll be watching for Jimenez over the next couple weeks, currently his chase rate is at the highest point in his career. His out-of-zone contact rate is the lowest it's ever been. So before he would chase and he'd still make contact. Now he's chasing and he's not making contact. So you got to assume he's swinging at worse pitches now when he's swinging out of the zone. His contact rate overall, 10 percentage points lower than last season and among the lowest of his career. It's not just an Eloy problem. Don't get me wrong. I'm not only putting this one on Eloy when it comes to chase rates, contact rates. For me, it's something where he hasn't been on the field. I get that. I'm willing to give some runway for someone coming back from an injury, which again, it comes back to your article. How much runway do you give these guys each time they're getting hurt?
Yeah.
But those are sort of the things I'll be watching in terms of when do we see the Eloy Jimenez we saw even second half of last year, or where does he kind of end up this season?
Yeah, for sure. It makes sense. I think, it's 14 games he's played this season, right? And so we also know Jose Abreu took an entire month every season to stop swinging at bad pitches and to become a better hitter. And then he was mostly pretty damn good hitter the rest of the season, May looking forward. And so, I think if in May those peripherals that you mentioned are still there, that's concerning to me. But I think it's very possible it's just him getting back in the groove. And trying to find that strike zone. But that's a good point. His walk rate, I will say, first 2 years of his career, he was walking at a 6% and then a 5.3% clip. Last season, it went up to 8.6, and this season, it's 9.1. So that, if anything, is one thing you can look at and be like, oh, maybe this year he'll be a little better at that. So if he can keep that up, that'd be really good because an above-average walk rate for Eloy would do great things for him too. So hopefully that stays. The contact stuff goes back to being good. But yeah, we'll see how those trends even out, potentially. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stuff that you brought up, Jordan, that's stuff that's going to need to be brought, kind of tested over time. I one thing I've noticed, because Eloy has had to come back from the IL so many times, unfortunately. One thing I always notice when he comes back is he's really trying to push the issue in the batter's box, and that just never works. That never works. I mean, you have to have insane plate discipline to be able to, force the issue out of the box. You have to be able to take the pitches that you're given, you know what I mean? And it seems like every time, besides maybe an outlier here or there, it seems like if he's coming straight off the IL and didn't have, a chance to sit in AAA for, a week or something like that, he's trying to push the issue. He's trying to be that spark of the offense because the offense probably wasn't doing a whole lot when he was gone. And I think once he gets a chance to settle in, that's when you start seeing him really get comfortable in the box. And I think that's what we saw last year because, people always talk about how well he played in the second half last year. That first week or two that he was back was pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. He was looking rough out there, and everybody started, you start getting the murmurs about, oh, is Eloy Jimenez, going to be the same guy moving forward, because that's kind of the narrative every single time. You kind of brought that up, Tim. But I really do think that the Rays series is a step in the right direction. He is definitely chasing a little bit more than I'd like to see, but hopefully that's something that kind of starts working himself out of that. He can really work a count when he wants to. When he's patient in the box, he could start 0-2 and work it all the way to a full count and potentially even work a walk. We've seen him do it plenty of times. He was doing it even before he got injured this year. And that's definitely the best version of Eloy Jimenez because once he can start taking walks, pitchers are going to start having to force pitches into the zone, and that's where he's just going to absolutely eat them alive. So
Yeah.
I'm with you, Tim. I'm not worried about the talent that is Eloy Jimenez. His bat plays. I think he reminds me a lot of an unfortunately more injured version of Yordan Alvarez. I think they have a lot of similar style with how good naturally they are as batters. We just need to be able to see it over the course of a long season. Like if Eloy can stay healthy moving forward, I think that's something that he can really benefit from.
Definitely.
But anyway, we are running a little bit short on time. Tim, do you have anything you need to plug? I know you just wrote this awesome article on SoxOn35th.com called "Are the White Sox Soft?" We just discussed it, and in case anybody who's listening at home kind of spaced out for a minute, it's a great article. You should definitely go listen to it. But Tim, where can we find you online?
Yeah, so definitely find me on Twitter at Tim the Moran. That's at Tim the Moran, last name Moran. And I got a couple articles, I think, a couple of recaps this week. Hopefully the White Sox can pick up a couple wins. I would love to be able to write those and have people read about a win. So that's what's coming up for me soon. And definitely follow me on Twitter. Eloy content about, stuff we all have to talk about, the White Sox playing baseball games. So,
Tim, you've come a long way since the days I was your RA way back when. So it's good to see you grow. It's good to see you putting out good content, and it's always been a pleasure having you at the site, and glad to have you on this episode as well.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it, guys.
Guys, I always love getting the Sox on 35th contributors over on the podcast. It was a great discussion with Tim Moran. Guy who obviously has been with the website for a while. Always love getting an Eloy guy on here as well. I mean, I can't deny it. Sometimes I feel like I'm kind of standing on my own with something like that. But always love it. Always love it. It was a great discussion.
And Tim always writes good articles too. He works hard. I've known Tim for quite a bit of time. He's a good kid. Works hard. Writes really well and puts a lot of good work into his stuff. So make sure to check out the article if you haven't yet.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have this week for the Sox on 35th podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you might listen. Also, be sure to check out the website at SoxOn35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at SoxOn35th to stay up to date with your Chicago White Sox. This has been Coughlin, joined as always with Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. We will be back next week as we cover another exciting week of White Sox baseball. Thank you, and go Sox.
You sure about that exciting? Go Sox.
Go Sox.
If this is another bad week, Nick, you're going second when we do the Go Sox. We got to change the mojo. Something's got to change.
Sounds good.